Welcome everyone to the Assess Your Skilling with the Skills Validation Framework session. My name is Bill Wade, and I'm a Senior Director of Learning Solutions here at Skillable. And I am the Ed McMahon to Katie Oze's Johnny Carson. So without further ado, here's Katie. Katie, talk about yourself.
Thanks, Bill. I mean, that's probably the best introduction you've ever given me. We're going to stick to that one. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I am Katie Oze. I'm the Director for Content Services. And we wanted to talk a little bit today about the Skills Validation Framework. This is a framework that our team uses really to just build content that's really useful for validating where your learners are, where they need to go, what they've accomplished. So we'll get right into it and talk a little bit about the whys and the hows. So we want to start with what's really at stake here. Why is validation so important? And I know we touched on this a little bit in the last session, but really it just comes down to understanding where the knowledge is being applied and how it can turn into skills that your workforce really needs to get things accomplished, reach their goals, reach business goals. And so we all know that learning is a foundation, but in order to stay competitive in the market, it really needs to transition into skilling. How can people do the things they need to do in order to accomplish their goals? So we've grabbed a few facts and figures here that talk about this in a more tangible way. There's three on here actually that really speak loudly to me. The first one is that it can cost up to 6 times more to source talent from outside a company. And so that tells me there is investment here, but of course that investment can pay dividends. Upskilling and reskilling versus finding that new talent is where you're going to find that savings and that value. And then 70% of employees report that they don't have mastery of skills needed to do their jobs. And so they want to get it done, but they don't know how to accomplish it without those skills, right? And so having a workforce that's confident and has those skills to apply just makes their lives easier. They feel more involved, all those good things. And then finally, the only 12% of employees apply new skills that they've learned in their training. And so that speaks to the validation for me, right? If they are learning new things, but they can't apply it, how do we know that without having some sort of structure to validate that information?
So Andrew, Lucy, Pedro, Sasha, how do you see your organizations fitting into some of these statistics? Are you confident that when you send your learners through your curriculum that they come out with the skills that they need? And do you have ways of validating that they have those skills? And do you have any feedback on some of these statistics here? Do these ring true with you?
Or maybe Bill, have you seen from some of our customers that some of these ring true? Have you heard maybe anything about how validation is lacking and that's causing a riff or some issues internally?
Yeah, the areas I see it most prevalent, and there's two really. One is the common one, which is there's a lot of people who go through training, but there's really not a good way of measuring what they got out of that training and how did they need that amount of training? Were they overtrained? Were they undertrained? Where are they in their learning journey? And then the other one is more about validating what they have learned. So there's a lot of people with some customers that we have that are required to go through training. They may be required to go through 4 days of training that they don't really need. So what the skills validation framework helps to solve is saving some of those people time so that they can test out of having to go through training in the first place. And so through this validation framework, we can validate people need the training before they're forced to take it. And then once they're done with the training, we can validate that they got out of that what was intended.
I'll also share, I work with DocuSign, and we're looking at, I'm just in the process of creating a skillable prototype, but we're really trying to upskill our partners and make sure that they understand how to use our product and implement it for customers. And so we've been building out a badging program and we're planning on a certification program to verify that they have those skills in place. So this is absolutely like, front and center what we're looking at right now and working with, trying to make sure that when we say people are certified partners are certified to do this, that they actually like have all those skills and they're ready to go.
Yep, that's exactly what this is about.
Yeah, right. The stakes kind of get higher in that regard, right? It's a party that's removed from you, but it's even more important than to validate that what's being put out there is valuable to them and to others if you scale from there.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks for sharing. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about how we accomplish some solutions to some of these issues. So here at Skillable, we have the skills validation framework. It's really intended to help organizations with these exact issues. We want to turn learning and skilling efforts into business results. We want the validation to lead the way so that we're not scrambling in the dark and creating churn, creating extra investments that don't pay off in the end. So that's the definition. That's what we're trying to solve here. And so a little bit about how we do that. There's two main principles that then break down a little bit further. But the first one is that we plan for the whole skills journey. So it's great to have validation and evaluation on the back end, but what about where you start? We want to design from the beginning and define those outcomes and those business goals so that we know where we're going, chart a path, so to speak. And then we plug in a lot of challenge-centric approaches so that we can encourage skill gain from the very beginning. It's all about that skilling, that practice. We often say around here, we want people to fail fast and fail forward. So it's taking that ethos and starting it from the beginning. And then you can plug and play these ideas in any taxonomy you use, any competency framework that you use. It's sky's the limit, really. The framework is really supposed to adapt to those needs.
And those journeys, there can be multiple journeys. So you can have a product or service where you have a sales path, you have a support path, you have an implementation path. And while a lot of the content may be the same, there's a different twist on each one of those different audiences. So the journey can be multifaceted.
Totally. And then that journey turns into that validated progress. That's our second principle. So it's not just to say, yes, progress has been made. Here's metrics to show you. The other side of it is using that validation for the next step. Maybe it means that there's continued learning. Now that we know this person is really good at data science and they want a role in data science, we can chart that path for them. It's really about reusing, readapting based on the validation that is seen along the way. That's sort of what the visual is supposed to speak to here. There's stops along the way. Not everybody's going to need them, but we don't know that unless we're validating at each step. So there's a couple ways we do this. We're going to start with strategically. So at a high level, there's sort of 4 pillars that talk to the tasks we can accomplish in order to build out that structure. So as I've been saying, sort of peppered in here, is we really start with those business outcomes. Let's define where we're starting. What are the needs of the customer or the learner or the business? We want to triangulate all of those pieces and find in the middle of that Venn diagram, what is it we're trying to accomplish and how is it measurable? With that, we can create logic mapping. We go into the design document, what is it we want to build to meet those goals? And then how do we want to evaluate it? What are the important parts? And why are we evaluating it? I think that's also very important. So all of these pull together to give us a really robust framework that can apply to a lot of use cases. So I wanted to stop and maybe ask Bill, what are a few of the use cases that you see our customers using where this would apply?
Well, we have one customer in particular who's really shifting right now, Microsoft in particular, who's traditionally done the single user, single lab experience where they learn how to deploy Azure in a particular environment. And what they've found over the years is that it's created a bunch of individual contributors to a certain in a certain sense. They've not really been trained to work as a team. So a lot of their labs and learning are shifting right now. It's interesting. I talked to different people in different parts of the organization, and they're all saying the same thing, where they want to have more team-based, coached learning experiences, where the team as a team would go into a customer, goes into this lab environment. There's a coach. They're presented with a scenario. There's a team lead assigned. That team lead gives everyone the scenario. They figure out how they're going to accomplish the task. They divide tasks amongst them. They all work on a single tenant. They go do their different tasks. They come out, they build a report, and then that is the deliverable that they get back to the coach and get credit for having accomplished the task or not. So you can see the business outcome in this case for Microsoft in particular has really changed in that they not only want to teach people the technology, they want to start teaching people to work as a team in a social environment with coaches and leads and similar skills across multiple folks. So that's one specific area. Another one which is becoming really popular is this test out thing I mentioned a little bit earlier, in that they will have a partner perhaps, or an internal person who has to get an endorsement or a certification in a particular technology. And that person may already have the knowledge needed to get that endorsement. So they have a lab up front. It's a scored lab that they go through and they deploy this solution. And at the end, they click score this lab. And we have a bunch of scripts, we call activities, run against the work that they've done to validate that they did it correctly. And if they've done it correctly, they get the endorsement and they don't have to attend the 3 days worth of training. Mm-hmm. They then those who don't pass that, they answer a questionnaire, and based on the answers to their questions, and if they took the scored lab, the score they got, they're presented with a couple of different learning paths they can take. It can be instructor-led training, it can be e-learning, it can be other types of self-paced or a blend between the two. And during that, we use a lot of those same activities we developed in the lab where we're scoring, to give them activity-based assessments during the lab. So as they're going through the lab in an e-learning environment, they can do a particular task and then they can check their work, and they can get feedback that they did that task correctly, or they can get feedback they did it incorrectly, and at that point give them URLs to documents on how to do it correctly, or actually step-by-step on how to perform those tasks. And so then once they get through the training, they basically take that same pre-assessment lab again. It might be a slightly different scenario, so it's not, a repeat. And then those same activities are used again to score their performance and give them the endorsement. Mm-hmm. So those are some different ways that this has been. I've seen this used today.
Yeah, we talked a little in the last session about how it also can be used for recruiting. I think one of the presenters, I don't remember who had it, they had an example of a sous chef who really wanted to get into cyber defense. And so they were able to take these tests to sort of prove that, despite the fact that maybe their resume doesn't prove that they can do this, their actual skills show that they're very adept. And so you can find these sort of diamonds in the rough, so to speak, people you wouldn't look at normally because they don't have a background in whatever they want to do. They can now prove they're the right candidate through validated, skills recruiting. And it comes back to this same strategic setup, right? Whoever's looking for that opening, they've defined what they're looking for. They have a goal in mind. And then they go through the holistic journey and the evaluation process to build something that gets them exactly what they're looking for. So here's a tactical example, and I think Bill showed a little bit of this in one of his examples, but we wanted to spread it out here to show that we start with this acquisition, right? We want to set the stage with some pre-testing or something similar where a student can see for themselves, and the business can also see, where are we starting? What is ground zero, whatever that is. And even if you have several people starting in different places, that's still really valuable information, because then we can adapt to that learning experience for each individual. And then from there, we go into a series of activity-based assessment. So Integrated labs are a good place to practice. There's maybe some e-learning that gives them some extra knowledge to bolster the skills as they move on. The post-training practice and the self-study, that all leads them to possibly certification, or at least that validated end result. They started from zero, now where are they?
Yeah, there's some creative ways of doing this. The important thing to understand is the difference between PBT and ABA. And PBT is a scored experience, and that pre-training assessment is scored. So they're not given any help along the way in the pre-training assessment or at the end during certification. But the ABA, the activities-based assessment, is not scored. They're guided through the lab, and they can check their work as they go and give, like I mentioned in the last slide, be given feedback whether they did it correctly or not. It's the same scripts that are written for the PBT or the ABA. It's just simply telling the lab profile that this is a scored lab. So we've seen some customers do some interesting things with this. So for example, there's one solution that a customer wants to give endorsements to for the users who take the course. And while they're doing the lab, they can check their work using the ABA script as much as they want. And if they did it incorrectly, they're not given any feedback. They're just told they've done it incorrectly. But there's also a button we've put in there, which is another type of ABA button, which they can click ask for help. And the ask for help will give them more detailed information on how to complete that task. So they're able to check their work as many times as they want on each task, but they're only allowed to ask for help a certain amount of time. So if they ask for help more than 4 times during the course of the lab, then they haven't passed the lab. So there's some creative things that you can do on the platform with these activities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing in the comments, Lucy, you mentioned that this is something that you're actually looking for, is validating through check scripts and badging. Is it something you've already experienced, or do you see how maybe this process here could apply?
Yes, thanks. So we do have some check scripts implemented. So I work for Ivor Healthcare, and I had Eric Grau and Wayne on my team previously. And we started implementing, well, they started implementing check scripts as a way to, we're going to start to score the labs. And it's not simply, because currently it's just based on completion. And they were building feedback into those check scripts, kind of similar to the button that you just described. But we didn't limit the number of times that they could, check it or something like that. And we didn't limit the questions that they could ask. So that's something that I'm thinking about implementing.
Yeah, I think those limits give you a great way to continue to measure that validation, but don't sell the feedback short. I think the feedback really does help in that whole validation process. It's all about that middle part with the practice, right?
Andrew also mentions he likes the idea of being able to gate the learner's progress through the lab, and that's what you can do here with these activity-based assessment scripts. You can either allow them to continue on if they didn't get it correctly, but more commonly, you can keep them from going to the next task before they until they've finished the current task correctly, which not only is important for the learner, but a lot of times is important for the lab, because tasks down the road may not work correctly if you didn't do the previous tasks right.
Right. It also could be a bit of a gatekeeping in that it just opens the right door. So if somebody doesn't test very well, then maybe the next step is that they go through a guided challenge that we build for them instead of the more advanced or the expert version. So that way they get sort of spoon-fed the information they need, so they can still achieve that goal, but they just have to go a different route.
Yeah. And then also a quick note, I'm not sure how much everyone knows about these activity-based assessments. They can also be multiple choice questions. There's 4 or 5 different question types you can actually put in the lab. They don't have to be activities which are scripts testing the environment. You can actually ask knowledge check questions as you go, and those can be scored, and those can be ABA as well.
Yep, good call. It's nice to build in sort of the knowledge-based testing with the skills-based testing. It's a rounder approach to what we're trying to achieve in the end.
Yeah.
So a couple other samples we have of things that we'll build or we've seen our customers build to enrich a journey like this. It can start from anywhere, honestly, but obviously there's options for e-learning. You can build a scenario-based approach to build that knowledge base and then turn that into a workshop or a hackathon where there's deep practice and skill building in a group setting. We've talked a little bit about the performance testing and the challenge labs, but really there's a wide array here, and these are just some of, like, the top 6, I guess, that we see. But I wanted to stop and see, are there any other solutions that our group here today either wishes they could implement or they are implementing and finding it to be really valuable? What other sort of skilling and learning solutions are you developing and publishing?
Hi. Oh, I have one more thing to add. Yeah, so we did some check scripts with our guided labs, and they worked really well. But one of the things we wanted to build more are those challenge labs. And I heard from the keynote that you guys are releasing challenge, like templates, I guess, in June, July, or challenge lab templates. And that's something that I think we've struggled with in terms of we gave them scenarios, but I guess it wasn't the right amount of information, or it was just something about those challenge labs that were very difficult to build and assess. So
Yeah, those templates are going to be fantastic for this validated learning. We got a little sneak peek actually yesterday of how far they've come, and they really do set you up for success. They basically build off of the tenets we hold as developers ourselves. And then there's also, we have a lot of custom builders on our team that can build for our customers who either don't have time, don't have devs of their own, or like you're looking at for these templates, just want that extra expertise, I guess, in how to build. Because we have obviously the challenge labs that are off the shelf, and those work great. And so building off of that model is a great way to reinforce.
We also have a lot of great analytics that we have access to with regard to individual activities within a lab. So if everyone's unsuccessful at a particular task, then you might need to go look at that task, go look at that activity and put more steps in there, give a clear scenario, provide more information. So you can, as these are being run, look at the success rate of individual tasks, and if everyone's getting others right, maybe those need to be made a little bit more difficult. You can do that type of analysis. You can also go a step further and look at if these are instructor-led courses, you can look on an instructor basis. Which instructor has the most students being successful in the lab, and which instructors are not, and perhaps there's something wanting for those individual instructors.
Okay. Right, yeah, and just something you said triggered that, you can also probably switch between like a guided versus a challenge. So if you started off with a challenge and you found that you failed, or I failed 4 or 5 times on a particular step, I guess there would be a backend API and developer work that could be done to trigger, using triggers, I guess, to make it more of a guided lab.
Right. Yeah, it becomes adaptive so that it really is giving the learner exactly what they need. There's a few ways to do it. A simple way also is that you give the power to the learner. They can choose if they want to go guided because they really didn't do well in the last score, or they want to challenge themselves and really bump up to expert. But yeah, I think, I mean, I've seen it in practice anyway, that there are ways to build in those triggers so the adaptation happens based off of the validation that happened before.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. And also looking, of course, at the overall analytics of certain labs, and maybe
exactly
might not be appropriate for our just switching to instructor. Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, we try to open it up so it can be used in different ways, and it can be guided in different ways. Any other solutions out there people are looking for or have seen work really effectively? All right. So we thought we would just conclude here with a bit of a summary, talking about these 4 pillars that we build this framework off of. So again, we want to start with those results. What is it we're trying to quantify and measure, and what are the goals attached to them? There's the business goals of reaching and scaling new heights, but there's also learner goals that we want to consider too. Oftentimes, there's upward momentum people are looking for, and we want to calculate all of that to know where we're starting. With that information, we can then design a holistic journey that builds in those validation checks and those evaluations throughout, so that we can calibrate and adapt as needed for each journey, either individually or at that team level. And then we all want to make sure we're on the right track with that investment, right? The more we validate, the more you can really look at that ROI and map where you're going, not just for the learners, but for that investment. Any final questions?
Well, we're always here for you. So if you ever have any questions in the future, or you need any help with any of this stuff, you want something explained in a little bit more detail, you want some demos, I mean, we're here for you. So don't feel free to reach out and let us know how we can help you.
Thank you so much. This was super helpful.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.